He notices when you are quiet. He's vulnerable with you. He sends good morning and good night texts. His texts are long and detailed, and he responds quickly, but never initiates. Welcome to the channel. If you've been here before, welcome back. Today we're looking at 5 texting green flags that are actually red when you look at them closely. I see these mentioned on other channels, and I think to myself, that's not a green flag at all. I need to talk about that. So here they are, one at a time. Let's dive straight into them. The first is that he notices when you are quiet and picks up on it. I think the idea is, well, he's very emotionally intelligent. He's picking up on me. Actually, this is a red flag. When a guy is saying, hey, are you there? Hey, he's following up. Hey, you haven't responded. What's going on? Is everything okay? Look, if it's a relationship, of course, that would be one thing, but this is not a relationship. We're not talking in a relationship context here. We're talking in a texting, dating context. And if a guy is following up repeatedly when you're not responding, that to me is a red flag that he's not acknowledging the fact that you have independence, that you have a life outside of him. And often what I see, honestly, is a guy's using it as a sort of a false, I'll just say that something's happened to her. I hope she's okay. And it actually comes from a place of insecurity within him where he's checking up on you because he's not sure where he stands. So instead of actually asking the question about that or having the conversation with you, he sends you this weird follow-up text or multiple follow-up texts to try to sneakily get an answer as to what's going on with you without directly asking the question. So I guess what I'm saying here is it's a sign of insecurity if a guy is following up, checking in on you when you haven't responded. Again, it would be one thing if you guys are married or in a long-term relationship and suddenly you've gone quiet for the day when you wouldn't usually do that. That's not what I'm talking about here. I'm talking about dating. And I'm talking about if a guy is sending you repeated messages, hey, did you get my message? What's going on? Is everything okay? In early dating, red flag. You don't want to deal with that. Number 2, he's vulnerable with you. Who doesn't love vulnerability? It's the catchword of psychology in the 21st century. Brene Brown, all that good stuff. Vulnerability is power. Vulnerability is courage. Well, I'm sorry. Vulnerability over text is like being naked in a suit of armor. It is basically trying to be vulnerable, pretending you are vulnerable while being completely invulnerable. It's like posting a vulnerable story on Facebook and then closing your laptop. There's no actual vulnerability to that. Yes, you put yourself out there, but the real vulnerability comes in seeing the response you get from the audience, whether it be one person or 1,000 people that you're speaking to. True vulnerability comes from, okay, how am I being perceived here moment to moment? And I know you might be saying, well, that's not quite true, Mark. People can put comments on stuff. It's still not the same. The real vulnerability comes from sharing things in person, in real time, and certainly expressing them through your voice, which you can't plan, just like this video, right? I'm speaking to you without planning ahead other than the points, as opposed to scripting the whole thing and reading off a teleprompter, or like a text message where you can plan the whole thing in immaculate detail. It's not real vulnerability, and I believe it's a red flag you should watch out for, because if someone is relying on text to be vulnerable, then that's saying that they don't have the core skills or core confidence to embrace that vulnerability in what would be a more appropriate setting. That to me is why vulnerability, significant vulnerability over text, is a red flag, not a green flag like it might see at first sight. Number 3, perhaps the most controversial in the video, good morning and good night texts. I'm sorry, but I'm not sorry. These are a red flag. Now, once in a while, every now and then, maybe in the morning or at night. But if there's constant good morning and good night texts from right at the beginning or early on in dating before it's appropriate, that's a red flag. I don't care what anyone says. If someone is relying on text as the primary means to show their interest, to keep you engaged, to basically communicate with you and build consistency, that is a low-hanging fruit. That is not a real way to build connection. And I don't know many, if any, couples that survive and build good relationships based off of good morning and good night texts. I'm sure they happen in the background for some couples, but it is not the primary way to build connection. Focus your standards. I get a lot of questions about this. Focus your standards around phone calls and real life dates. Okay. And video dates, if that's your thing. That should be what you care about, because that's where the real guys who can actually connect with you and who are emotionally available to connect with you, that's where you're going to see them. That's where you're going to feel them. And for the women, for you as well, that's where you are going to be able to show up and practice your emotional availability. So I'm really against good morning and good night texts. especially when combined together, because they are a cheap hanging fruit. They're pseudo romance. They're sort of pseudo intimacy. They make you feel like you have something and you don't actually have anything at all. You just have someone who's texting you for 1 second each morning and night. So you don't have anything, but you feel like you do. And worst, when they're taken away for a day or so, you get this anxiety, which should never have been there in the first place. But you go, wait a minute, I didn't send the good morning, or he didn't send the good morning text today. Does this mean he's lost interest? Are we going nowhere now? And it basically builds you up. Do you see how it's building you up in this to this false sense of security that never should have been there in the first place? Now, if someone has been taking you on dates and calling you, and then they start pulling back from dates and not wanting to call you, okay, fair enough. You've built a connection and they're pulling it away. Texting, especially good morning combined with good night text, gives you the false impression you are building something, but you're not. There's nothing being built. It's like if we were scoring this out of 10, good morning and good night text cap out at about a 1.5. That's like the max, but it feels like an 8. So you're sitting there going, oh, we have this amazing 8 out of 10 connection, and then it disappears one day and you crash back down, but it was all a mirage. It was never there to begin with. So good morning, especially when combined with good night text, and red flag in the guy, and don't set them as a standard for yourself. Have higher standards is what I'm really saying here. Number 4, long and detailed texts. Now, I understand maybe a little bit at the start if you're getting to know each other on the first couple of questions, meaning on an app, you might fire a question or two back and write perhaps a little bit more. There might be other times where you can't talk for some reason. Maybe your relatives are over or something, and instead of being able to call or send a voice memo, you send a big long text. That being said, if your relatives are there, spend time with your relatives. Get off your phone and spend time with your relatives. The point is, walls of text never indicate a secure, fully balanced and functioning person. It's not a good sign. It's not good to send them. It's not good to receive them. It's not good to debate in them. There's basically no wins that come from long, wordy text. The only long and wordy text that is a great text is one that is about sexting. If you want to do that, if you're with the right guy, he's with you, go nuts. Write a nice little romantic, exotic, whatever novel to each other. But when it comes to most long and detailed text, it is not that. Let's be real. It is, I'm explaining myself, we're going into all this quote unquote intimacy, and there's just too much. There's too much fluff and there's too much avoidance of real intimacy. That's the real problem here. So anytime you see those walls of text, think of it as an orange or red flag, whether it's coming from you or from the other person, and say, hey, let's jump on a call or let's voicemail instead. Don't be a part of it. And I would not recommend dating men who want to date you that way. Big red flag. It feels nice, but really texting red flag. And the 5th one is he responds quickly, but never initiates. Of course, it's so nice. And I get women who come to me, they say, well, every time I text me, he responds straight away. He's totally engaged. And I say, yeah, but does he ever text you? Does he initiate? Does he take the bull by the horns himself and actually move things forward? And they say, well, no, I guess he doesn't. But he responds straight away, Mark. Doesn't mean anything. If a guy responds straight away, it means he doesn't want to hurt you. It means he doesn't want you to think the connection is completely lost, but his actions of not moving anything forward, of not initiating, are showing that there's big blocks for him there. He may not even be conscious or cognizant of what the blocks are. It's kind of like how we do that thing where we say, oh, I should send that person a letter, and logically you should do it, but it takes you like a month to do it. Or maybe you miss the deadline. You have the time, if you're honest, you have the bandwidth, but somehow it gets procrastinated to the end of the day, the end of the week, the end of the month. The reason that happens is there is some resistance in you to sending that letter. Something in you, a fear or some other block or some other belief, hesitancy, is stopping you sending the letter. That's the only reason. It's the same with a guy who is initiating and texting with you. If he is giving some signals like responding, then he might be thinking, oh yeah, she's really cool. Yeah, I want to get to know her. But if he's not acting on it, if there's not some sort of initiation and follow through from him to do that without you prompting him first, then it's essentially saying there is some sort of emotional block, belief, something working against you in his system that's just making him go, I'll do it tomorrow. And then tomorrow never comes. So those are 5 texting green flags. Actually, they're red flags. You thought they were green, but they're red. Now you know by the end of this video, and hopefully you know why. Have you received one of these? Let me know in the comments below. I'd love to hear. And if you want a session with me for any reason at all, we've got my no man, no fee guarantee. Or if you want to work through a relationship issue, working through something with an ex, whatever it is, booking link is down below. Thanks again for watching. Hit the subscribe button with the little bell. Give the video a thumbs up, and I'll see you in the next one very soon.